Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is negotiate. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might hear the verb negotiate used is to mean to obtain or bring about by discussion. So coming to some sort of result through discussion. A second way you might hear the verb negotiate used is to mean to try to reach an agreement or a compromise by discussion with others. I feel like this is the most common way that I hear this particular verb used. And you may hear it used in connection to athletes, negotiating or trying to reach an agreement with a particular team. We often hear it as if you follow politics as well. That might be another area where you hear of two different political parties or two groups trying to come to some sort of compromise or agreement. A third way you could hear the verb negotiate used is to mean to find a way over or through a difficult path. So you might think about hiking in the woods and having a tree kind of crossing that path. You might have to find a way through it. Maybe the bridge is out over a little stream. And again, you've got to find some way to cross. A fourth way you could hear the verb negotiate used is to mean to transfer a check, a bill, some other type of legal document to the legal ownership of another person. This one, not quite as common, but perhaps in law or accounting, you might run into this particular usage as well. You should know that negotiate is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, I'm going to drop the E and then add ing to form negotiating. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. The base verb, negotiate, ends in a T sound. So our past tense ending is going to make an id sound. Negotiated, negotiated. You'll be happy to know I don't have any additional meanings through phrasal verbs, so that's going to allow us to do some more focused verb tense practice. And all this week, we're going to review active and passive voice. And today we're going to start with the simple past tense. And before we look at example sentences using our verb of the day, let's do just a little bit of review. So sentences, most commonly, you're going to hear different speakers, you're going to read sentences that are in active voice. And that's the majority of the videos I do on this channel are in the active voice. And so I am beginning a sentence with the person or the thing that is responsible for the action. Some people think of this kind of as doing the action. So two examples of that would be Jay washed the dishes and Kelly cooked dinner. So here, the base verb, wash, or in the past tense here, washed, that is the action. And we know Jay, the name that begins the sentence, is responsible for that action. In the second sentence, Kelly is responsible for the action of cooking. Now, sentences in the passive voice, though, are going to begin with the person or the thing that is acted on. I know some teachers will talk about the thing or person that receives the action, that same idea here. So in these passive voice sentences, the person who is responsible for the action may not be included in the sentence, or that person may come at the very end of the sentence after the preposition by. So I'm going to take our first two active voice examples and make them passive. The dishes were washed. I could put a period there. That's a nice, complete passive voice sentence. I could also say the dishes were washed by Jay. My second example, dinner was cooked. I could put a period there, or I could say dinner was cooked by Kelly. That would be fine too. Both of those are examples of the passive voice. And many students have asked me over the course of many classes, why do we have these different active versus passive voices? And there are a few different reasons. So passive voice might be used in some circumstances because the person who is doing the action or who is responsible for the action is not known. A second reason that passive voice might be used is that the person who is doing the action it's not that important. And that sort of connects to a third reason, which is the writer or the speaker really wants to emphasize that the object. So again, that person or the thing that is acted on. And this is one way to sort of bring your listener or your reader's attention by starting that sentence with the thing or the person who is acted on. So now, with that little review in mind, let's take a look at some example sentences with our verb negotiate. So I'm going to give you an example of active voice in the simple past tense, and then we'll compare it to an example of passive voice in the simple past tense. So first, we'll start with the affirmative examples. Now, in active voice, simple past tense, I'm using the ed form of the verb. And this is true no matter what my subject is. So here's an example. The two countries negotiated a new peace treaty. So here I know there are two countries who are responsible for that action of negotiating. Now, in the passive voice in the simple past tense, to make that, I am going to use was or were, depending on what my subject is, and then I'm going to use the participle form of the verb. So I, again, change the active voice into passive voice. A new peace treaty was negotiated. Now, in this one, again, we don't know who is responsible for that action, and that might be okay. As part of a longer article or paragraph, it might already be clear to your reader or a listener, if this is being spoken, which two countries are responsible for that action. Now, let's take a look at negative sentences. First, in the active voice, to make a negative simple past tense sentence, I'm going to use did not and then the base verb. So I'm not using that ed ending here in the negative. Let's look at an example. The school board and teacher union didn't negotiate new contracts. So again, I didn't mention this before, but you'll hear many times here, native speakers combine did not into the contraction didn't. Now, if we want to make the same sentence in the passive voice, I'm going to use either was not and the participle form of the verb, or were not and the participle form of the verb. So same sentence, but we're moving the object to the front or the beginning of the sentence. New contracts weren't negotiated by the school board and the teacher union. And again, that by is sort of optional, like we looked at in some of our earlier examples. And finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense in the active voice. To do this, I'm going to start with did, then I'll have my subject, and then the base verb. Did you negotiate rent? So, and this goes back to that second meaning of trying to reach an agreement or a compromise. So discussing with the landlord if you're the tenant, or vice versa, what would be a fair price. Now, if you want to make a yes or no question in the passive voice, again, we'll start with was or were, and then we have that object, the thing that received the action, followed by the participle form of the verb. Was rent negotiated? Okay? Now, I think we're ready to look at some words that are related to our verb negotiate. And the first is just the noun form. It's negotiation. This means a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. Here's an example sentence. Negotiations between the team and athlete aren't going well. Related to the noun negotiation is negotiator. Again, another noun. This is just a person who conducts negotiations. So a person who conducts these discussions that hopefully will lead to an agreement. Here's an example sentence with this noun. Negotiators from both political parties are trying to reach a deal for another COVID relief package. So again, representatives is maybe another way to think of it. There might be circumstances where it's too hard to have too many voices or too many people in a room to find an agreement. So others are selected to sort of represent and have those discussions that will hopefully lead to an agreement. Another related word is the adjective negotiable. It means open to discussion or change. So an example of this could be, is the price negotiable? Right? So here we're asking, is this, if someone says, you want to buy this car for $5,000, for $1,000, right? And if they're, nope, it's 5,000 or it's nothing, right? That would lead us to the next adjective, which is non-negotiable. And this prefix non is suggesting not, so this is not open to discussion or change. Here is an example of that. These safety measures are non-negotiable. This is something I've seen in various articles and heard from people related to certain masking policies or the wearing of PPE, again, to keep people safe during the pandemic. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.